Hey everyone, this is Brad Hughes, School Principal and Chief Encouragement Officer from Ontario, Canada. And I've got some good news for you. You found the Good News, Brad News podcast, amplifying stories of heart-led educators moving from positive intention to action. Great people like you, improving kids' lives through service, connection, and finding the fun. So glad you're here. Let's get started. Hey listeners, welcome back. You're with episode 3 of the Good News, Brad News podcast, and thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Brad Hughes, and as you settle in and get comfortable, you'll be happy to know that this episode contains 100% of the recommended daily allowance of essential vitamins, minerals, and inspiration. We'll return next week with another incredible interview to feed your heart and soul. But in the meantime, coming up next on the Good News, Brad News podcast is a Good News, Brad News news brief. This is a Good News, Brad News news brief. Hey everyone. This is Brad Hughes with your Good News, Brad News news brief. This news brief is brought to you by Mastery Chat, Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Twitter, and by Self-Care. The time is now to invest in self-care. Now, I've been participating in the Teach Better Team's weekly Mastery Chat on Twitter for a while now, and I've even had the opportunity to be a contributor and a moderator. And as you just heard, Mastery Chat happens every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's an amazing chat that attracts incredible educators worldwide seeking to help one another do better and be better. Back in December 2020, Mastery Chat moderator Adam Cottos brought us a series of questions that helped us explore why self-care as educators and caregivers is so necessary. We reflected on the self-care steps we were going to take as we approached the winter break and what we were most looking forward to when we returned to school in 2021. You know, I truly believe that education is among the most personal of professions. In so many respects, we are what we do. And when we struggle to do well, we may also struggle to be well. In times like these, in order to counter understandable feelings of inadequacy and overwhelm, we need to keep giving ourselves and others permission to strive for today's best. In her book, Teachers Deserve It, middle school educator, presenter, and author Rae Hughart writes that today's best may only be a percentage of our usual capacity because we're struggling with any number of outside factors. Today's best might not be what you gave yesterday. It might not be what you'll be able to give tomorrow. It's just giving the best of what we can and what we have the capacity to offer today. And if you're a leader, remember that same permission to provide today's best extends to you and flows from you to the people in your organization or community. You may need to name that permission repeatedly before others begin to internalize it and grant it to themselves. And you can promote increased capacity by reducing or eliminating the distractions and stresses that you can for others, so others can focus on their core purpose and on restoring lost energy. The empathy necessary as educators and caregivers is tremendously energy intensive. Caring for oneself is critical to restoring the capacity to care for others. That's why it's essential to give express permission to yourself and others to prioritize the people, places, and activities that bring us joy. It's essential to name and praise when you and others invest in ourselves. I truly believe that self-care is a form of community health care and an expression of community service because self-care restores and extends our capacity to care for others. Meghan Lawson on Twitter reminds us that when you take care of yourself, you're taking care of everyone with whom you come into contact. Remember, emotions and emotional states are contagious. And with this knowledge, you see, self-care becomes a community act. We all know there's no pouring from an empty cup. And burnout is a costly wake-up call. Paying attention to, advocating for, and being strategic in addressing our needs upstream are essential. And we know some of our colleagues, kids, and families may be far downstream and really struggling right now. They may be feeling isolated and disconnected. And connecting during a global pandemic? Challenging, to say the least. In fact, the pandemic has fundamentally disrupted the way we connect. In so many respects, our personal, face-to-face connections carry with them anticipatory stress, worry, and fear, and they're mitigated by physical distancing restrictions, masks, as well as other personal protective equipment. We know that connection with others is crucial to our own health and well-being. It's never been more important to have people around us, companions, that are willing to hold space for our strong emotions, like worry, fear, frustration, anger, exhaustion. That space and those relationships are crucial to protecting us from stress and fear and restoring us to hopefulness when our reserves are low. And especially when our reserves are low, we have to be paying attention to how we connect with and soothe ourselves, and to what our self-talk sounds like. That little voice, that internal dialogue, especially when we encounter a setback, an embarrassment, a failure, or we're stuck in a rut. We have to learn to challenge our own little voice when what we're hearing is dismissive, diminishing, or even cruel. Do you practice self-compassion? Do you talk to yourself like you would your best friend? Your self-critical voice may be so common for you that you don't even notice it when it's present, or notice the toll it's taking on your well-being. Dr. Kristin Neff asks, how do you think things might change if you responded to yourself in the same way you typically respond to a close friend when he or she is suffering? Do you need to flip the script from fear to hope? Dr. Neff has great practical advice to learn to do just that. And I believe that how we shift from fear to hope is the problem of practice in the COVID era. Anytime we help ourselves or others take even a small step away from worry and isolation, we're doing this greatly needed work. When you recognize that others are struggling, remember, it's simply enough to be present and available. Others may not know what they need or even how you can help. Reassure them that not knowing is okay. Reassure them that you'll be there to companion them as they gradually move to hopefulness. I'm feeling grateful for all we've accomplished together in extraordinary circumstances during the global pandemic. I think back to those tumultuous first days and weeks after school closure in our district, and our tentative and fearful steps as we approached the first days back face-to-face in September. And after weeks of worry about reopening our school face-to-face, the sight of our first little ones and their families returning on the schoolyard with their masks on and their hopeful eyes is a memory I'll never forget. I'm returning to school ready to give what I can, where I can, to who I can, to give my today's best wholeheartedly and energetically. I'll do this by connecting with and investing in others, both in person and at a distance, however I can. I'll invest in the people and pastimes that bring me joy, and look for that joy to be reflected back to me. And I'm holding fast to my vision of restoring schools as havens of physical and emotional safety. And I'm so grateful to the people that surround me, willing to dig in to make that vision a reality. Thanks for tuning in to this week's Good News, Brad News News Brief. We'll be back next week with another engaging interview. So until next time, make self-care and self-compassion your gifts to yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Take care. Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Good News, Brad News podcast. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment wherever you found this podcast. And if you like what you heard, please recommend Good News, Brad News to a friend. And please hit me up on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at Brad, BRAD, _Hughes, HUGHES. I look forward to hearing from you and to reconnecting with you on our next episode. Until then, get out there and do amazing things.